At 4 in the morning, my phone lit up with a text from my daughter, Sarah. Mom, I know you paid $360,000 for this house, but my mother-in-law doesn't want you at Christmas dinner. I stared at the message, feeling something inside me finally snap. After 25 years of sacrificing everything for my family, after losing my husband and still keeping everyone afloat, this was my thanks. All right, I typed back. That single word would change everything. They had no idea what was coming. And were doing this out of love. The daughter I raised would have included me out of love, I countered. But here we are. I'll come by tomorrow with your presents, she said, switching tactics. We can have our own little celebration. No need, I have plans. Plans? What plans? Does it matter I'm not welcome at family Christmas, remember? I hung up on her protests. Let her wonder what her crazy mother was up to. In truth, my plans were simple. James and his wife had invited me to their Christmas dinner, refusing to let me spend the day alone. But more importantly, everything was set for December 26th. The day they planned to lock me away would instead be the day I reclaimed my life. I pulled out the photo album I'd grabbed from the house during one of my visits. Pictures of Sarah growing up of Frank, teaching her to ride a bike of family Christmases when love was real and untainted by greed. In one photo, Sarah, aged 7, grinned gap-toothed at the camera wearing the paper crown from a Christmas cracker. She'd written in crayon on the back, "I love you, Mommy. You're the best mommy in the whole world." I traced those misspelled words and wondered when that little girl had died, or if she'd ever really existed at all. The clock struck midnight. Christmas Day, the last Christmas I'd spend as Eleanor the victim. By tomorrow night, I'd be Eleanor the Phoenix, risen from the ashes of their betrayal. "Merry Christmas, Frank," I whispered to his photo. "Watch over me tomorrow. It's going to be one hell of a show." Outside snow began to fall, blanketing the world in deceptive purity. But I knew better now. Knew that the cleanest snow could hide the darkest dirt. Tomorrow I'd expose it all. Tonight, though, I slept better than I had in months. The sleep of the righteous, the sleep of the prepared, the sleep of a woman who'd finally remembered how to fight. Christmas Eve service had always been sacred to our family. For 40 years, Frank and I had sat in the same pew, third from the front on the left side. Even after he died, I maintained our tradition, feeling his presence strongest in that holy space where we'd exchanged our vows. This year felt different. This year, I walked into St. Andrew's not as Eleanor the grieving widow or Eleanor the devoted grandmother, but as Eleanor the warrior preparing for battle. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. The navy suit Sarah had given me for my 60th birthday, pearl earrings from Frank, and the brooch with the hidden camera Robert had procured for me. The church was packed with familiar faces, many of whom quickly looked away when they saw me. Dorothy's poison had spread far, but I held my head high and took my usual seat, nodding pleasantly to those brave enough to meet my eyes. I wasn't expecting them to show up. Sarah had been clear about not wanting me at family gatherings, but 15 minutes into the service, I heard the distinctive click of Dorothy's heels on marble. The entire family filed in, Dorothy leading like a queen, Marcus and Sarah behind her, Tommy bringing up the rear. They sat directly across from me, and I felt, rather than saw, the collective intake of breath from the congregation. The excluded grandmother sitting alone while her family clustered together. The optics were exactly what Dorothy wanted. But Tommy, my dear, brave boy, locked eyes with me and started to move. Sarah grabbed his arm, hissing something, but he shook her off. In front of everyone, he crossed the aisle and slid into the pew beside me. "Hi, Grandma," he said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I replied, pulling him close. Sarah's face flushed red. Marcus half stood, but Dorothy's manicured hand on his arm stopped him. They wouldn't make a scene not here. But I saw Dorothy's lips thin into a line that promised retribution. Throughout the service, Tommy held my hand. During the prayer, he whispered, "I told them I'd call the police if they tried to stop me. Said I'd report them for elder abuse. My grandson, the unexpected ally. Frank would have been so proud." When Pastor Williams called for the lighting of candles, Tommy helped me stand. As the flame passed from person to person, illuminating faces in the darkness, I caught Sarah watching us. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt, regret. But Dorothy leaned over and whispered something, and Sarah's expression hardened again. After the service, the congregation filed out slowly, many stopping to greet neighbors and wish them well. I took my time letting Tommy fill me in on school, his girlfriend, his plans for college. Normal grandmother-grandson conversation that seemed to infuriate Sarah more with each passing minute. "Eleanor." Pastor Williams approached beaming. "Wonderful to see you. And Tommy. Your grandmother tells me you're doing excellently in school." "Top of my class," Tommy confirmed proudly. "Grandma's been helping me with my college essays. She's really good at editing." "She always was sharp," Pastor Williams agreed. "I remember when she organized that fundraiser for the new roof. Most efficient committee chair we ever had." I saw several people nearby perk up at this. Not quite the confused elder Dorothy had been describing. "That was just last year," I said modestly, "though it feels like yesterday." "Time does fly. Will we see you at the New Year's service?" "Wouldn't miss it," I assured him. Sarah finally couldn't stand it anymore. She approached with Marcus flanking her, Dorothy hanging back but watching intently. "Tommy, we need to go," she said tightly. "Now." "I'm talking to Pastor Williams," Tommy replied calmly. "It's rude to interrupt." "Thomas Michael, don't test me." "Actually," I interjected smoothly, "I was hoping to discuss something with you, Sarah, privately." She glanced around at the curious faces trapped by social convention. "Fine. 5 minutes." I led her to the small prayer chapel, noting how Marcus started to follow before Dorothy called him back. Inside, surrounded by stained glass and silence, I faced my daughter. "What are you playing at?" she demanded immediately. "You know you're not supposed to— That is, we agreed you wouldn't come to family events." "No, you told me I wasn't welcome. There's a difference." "Mom, you're not well. This confusion, this aggressive behavior—" "Stop." My voice cut through her performance like a blade. "There's no one here to fool Sarah. No witnesses to gaslight. Just you and me and the truth." She actually stepped back. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. But let me be clear. I know everything. The drugging, the fake doctor's notes, the plan to lock me away, the inheritance you've been stealing. All of it." Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally defiance. "You're delusional. This is exactly why we're concerned." "Is that why you've been intercepting mail from Richard's lawyers? Because I'm delusional." That hit home. Her eyes widened before she caught herself. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Seattle law firm, Hanson Bridges and Associates, $587,000 and a house. Ring any bells?" "How did you—" She cut herself off, but it was too late. "How did I find out by not being the confused old woman you've been trying to create? I've spoken to them, Sarah. The money is already transferred to accounts you can't touch." "That money should go to your family," she said desperately. "To Tommy's education, to Marcus's gambling debts, to Dorothy's shopping sprees, to your kitchen renovation." I shook my head. "No, Sarah. That money is mine. Just like the house you're living in is mine. You gave us that house. I bought it and let you live there. Very different things. And considering you've used it as a base to plan my imprisonment, I think our arrangement needs reconsidering." Real panic flashed across her face then. "Mom, let's not be hasty. We can work this out. Maybe we overreacted about Christmas dinner. Why don't you come tomorrow? Dorothy won't mind. The reversal was so abrupt it might have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Oh, Sarah, do you really think I'm that easily manipulated? By dawn, I had filled 20 pages, and my transformation from doormat to warrior had begun. They thought they knew Eleanor the pushover, Eleanor the giver, Eleanor the easily manipulated widow. They were about to meet Eleanor the survivor, and she didn't come to play. November had always been my favorite month. Something about the crisp air and golden leaves reminded me of Frank's laugh and Sarah's childhood joy jumping in leaf piles. This year, though, November would become the month everything changed. I arrived at Sarah's house early on Thanksgiving morning, juggling grocery bags filled with ingredients for Frank's mother's stuffing recipe and my famous pecan pie. The spare key was under the decorative rock where it always was, and I let myself in quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of Dorothy's antique grandfather clock in the foyer. Setting my bags on the marble countertop I'd helped pay for, I noticed the baby monitor on the kitchen island. Strange, since Tommy was 16 and hadn't needed monitoring for over a decade. The screen showed the study, and I was about to turn it off when I heard voices. Clear as day, Dorothy's cultured tones mixed with Sarah's familiar cadence. After Christmas, we execute the plan. Dr. Harrison already agreed to sign the competency evaluation. Dorothy's voice carried that self-satisfied tone I'd grown to despise. My hands stilled on the pie crust I'd started rolling. Competency evaluation for whom? Sarah's response made my blood run cold. The house will finally be ours, free and clear. She's been so difficult lately forgetting things. Last week she couldn't even remember where she put her reading glasses. Because you moved them to the garage shelf. Dorothy laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Honestly, Sarah, your performance has been Oscar-worthy. The concerned daughter worried about her mother's declining mental state. Even I almost believed it when you cried at Bridge Club about finding her wandering the neighborhood. That never happened. Sarah giggled. Actually giggled. But Marjorie and the others ate it up. They've all noticed how confused Mom seems at family gatherings. The Xanax in her tea works perfectly. I gripped the rolling pin so hard my knuckles went white. The room spun, and not from any drug. Pure rage and betrayal made my vision blur. My daughter, my baby girl, had been drugging me. Every visit, every cup of tea lovingly prepared by Dorothy had been a weapon against me. Marcus has been brilliant with the recordings, Dorothy continued. That last one where she's talking about seeing Frank in the garden heartbreaking. No judge would question her need for supervised care after hearing that. She was talking to Tommy about how the roses reminded her of Grandpa, Sarah protested weakly. Marcus edited out Tommy's voice. Details. Dorothy dismissed. The important thing is that by New Year's, she'll be safely tucked away at Sunset Manor, and this house will be properly transferred to you and Marcus. No more pretending she has any claim to it. The power of attorney papers are ready. Dr. Harrison said he'd backdate them if needed. He owes me from when I covered his malpractice issue last year. Sarah's voice held a note of pride that shattered what was left of my heart. I forced myself to keep preparing food, my movements automatic while my mind raced. How long had this been going on? Every moment of confusion, every misplaced item, every concerned look exchanged between Sarah and Marcus. All of it orchestrated. A performance with me as the unwitting star and victim. What about Tommy? Dorothy asked. He's very attached to her. He's a teenager, Sarah dismissed. He'll adjust. Besides, once she's in the home, we'll limit visits. Say it upsets her or something. In a few months, he'll barely remember how close they were. The casualness with which my daughter discussed erasing me from my grandson's life made bile rise in my throat. Tommy, my sweet boy who still hugged me without embarrassment and asked for stories about his grandfather. They planned to steal him from me, too. And the inheritance from Frank's brother, Dorothy prompted. My ears perked up. Frank's brother Richard had been estranged from the family for decades. Last I'd heard, he was living in Seattle. The letters stopped coming last month. Marcus has been intercepting the mail. Apparently, Uncle Richard died and left everything to Mom. Almost $500,000. She has no idea. Perfect, Dorothy purred. With power of attorney, that money will cover Marcus's debts and still leave enough for the kitchen renovation I suggested. That dated style is so embarrassing when I bring friends over. I'd emptied my retirement account for that kitchen just 2 years ago. The conversation drifted to menu planning, and I forced myself to continue cooking. My hands moved independently, muscle memory taking over, while my brain processed the magnitude of their betrayal. When footsteps approached the kitchen, I was calmly basting the turkey, humming Frank's favorite hymn. "Mom," Sarah exclaimed, and I noted how easily the surprise and warmth flowed from her lips. "You're here early. Happy Thanksgiving." I turned, studying my daughter with new eyes. When had she become this stranger? The little girl who'd clung to my hand on the first day of school had transformed into a viper I'd nursed at my breast. "Wanted to get a head start on cooking," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "You know how I like to fuss." Sarah hugged me, and I fought not to recoil. How many hugs had been surveillance? How many loving gestures were actually checking if I smelled like the wine they'd later claim I drank too much of? "Let me help," she offered, tying on an apron. "Dorothy's still getting ready. You know how she is about her appearance." "Indeed I do," I murmured, returning to my pie. We worked side by side, and I marveled at Sarah's performance. She chatted about work, asked about my book club, the one I'd invented to cover my increasing absences, and fussed over me when I couldn't find the nutmeg. It was in the spice rack where it always was, but I played along, letting her discover it with gentle concern about my confusion. "Found it, Mom. It was right here. Didn't you see it?" "Oh, silly me." I laughed, noting how she exchanged a meaningful look with Marcus as he entered the kitchen. "Morning, Eleanor," Marcus said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt like Judas's must have. "Happy Thanksgiving. You're looking, well rested." The pause was deliberate. I recognized it now as part of the pattern. Plant doubt about my appearance, my health, my mental state. Death by 1,000 tiny cuts of concern. "Thank you, dear," I replied warmly. "You're looking prosperous as always." He preened at what he took as a compliment, not hearing the edge I'd intended. Prosperous on my dime, living in my house, planning to lock me away like a shameful secret. Dorothy swept in wearing a cashmere dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Eleanor," she acknowledged with a regal nod. "How nice that you could make it. Though you really shouldn't have troubled yourself with all this cooking. We could have had it catered." "No trouble at all," I assured her, noting the slight narrowing of her eyes at my cheerful tone. "I enjoy cooking for my family." "Your dedication is admirable," she said, making the compliment sound like an insult. "Sarah, dear, why don't you show your mother where we've moved the good china? She'll need it for table setting." They'd rearranged the dining room completely. The china cabinet Frank and I had given Sarah as a wedding gift was gone, replaced by an ostentatious display piece. My grandmother's china, which I'd passed down to Sarah, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Grandma's china?" I asked, genuinely curious despite myself. Sarah bit her lip in a practiced gesture of discomfort. "Oh, Mom, we discussed this last month. Don't you remember? You said it was too much trouble to maintain, so we donated it to charity." We'd had no such conversation. Grandma's china, hand-painted and brought from Ireland, given away like trash. Another piece of my history erased another forgotten conversation to add to their file. "Of course," I said smoothly. "How silly of me. The new china is lovely." Relief flashed across Sarah's face. She'd expected an argument, probably hoped for one. Every protest would be documented, every emotional response cataloged as evidence of my instability. The day proceeded with excruciating normalcy. Family arrived. Marcus's siblings with their spouses and children, Dorothy's sister Patricia, who shared her disdain for me, various friends who'd been carefully coached to watch for signs of my decline. I played my part perfectly, adding just enough hesitation to my movements, just enough confusion to conversations to maintain their narrative without overdoing it. But I also watched. Really watched. I saw how Dorothy steered conversations when I began to sound too coherent. How Marcus recorded on his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. How Sarah's friends asked leading questions designed to make me sound forgetful. Even my sweet Tommy had been coached, gently correcting stories I told, even when I'd recounted them perfectly. "No, Grandma," he'd say patiently. "That happened at Christmas, not Easter." "Did it?" I'd respond vaguely, watching Sarah beam with approval at her son's participation in gaslighting his grandmother. After dinner, while everyone dozed in front of the football game, I excused myself to use the powder room. Instead, I slipped into Sarah's home office. If they could snoop through my life, turnabout seemed fair play. The file wasn't even hidden. Mom's decline sat bold as brass in the filing cabinet, thick with documents. My hands trembled as I flipped through it. Incident reports dating back 2 years, each one a fabrication or gross exaggeration. Photos of me looking tired after double shifts labeled as concerning appearance changes. Transcripts of conversations edited to remove context. Medical articles about dementia and elder care facilities. Most damning was a letter from Dr. Harrison on official letterhead stating he'd been monitoring Eleanor's cognitive decline with growing concern. I'd never met the man in my life. At the bottom of the file, I found the power of attorney documents already signed by Sarah and Marcus, awaiting only a judge's approval. Next to it, information about Sunset Manor described as a premier memory care facility. The monthly cost was exactly what my Social Security and pension would cover, leaving nothing for me but institutionalized imprisonment. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. Returning the file exactly as I'd found it, I noticed another folder labeled Uncle Richard Estate. Inside were letters from a law firm in Seattle, increasingly urgent in tone, trying to reach me about a substantial inheritance. The most recent was dated just last week, threatening to consider me legally missing if they didn't hear from me soon. I memorized the law firm's information and slipped back to the party, accepting a cup of tea from Dorothy with a grateful smile. This time, I knew why it tasted bitter. This time, I only pretended to sip. "You look tired, Mom," Sarah observed with false concern. "Maybe you should head home before it gets dark. You know how you get confused driving at night." Another lie for the witnesses. I'd never had trouble driving at night. "You're right, dear," I agreed, adding a slight waver to my voice. "It has been a long day." I said my goodbyes, accepting hugs from people complicit in my planned destruction. Tommy held on extra long, and for a moment I saw confusion in his eyes. Some part of him knew this was wrong, but peer pressure and parental authority kept him silent. Driving home in the gathering dusk, I allowed myself 5 minutes of grief. 5 minutes to mourn the daughter I'd thought I'd raised, the family I'd believed I had. Then I dried my tears and began to plan. They thought they'd been clever, but they'd made crucial mistakes. The house was in my name only. The power of attorney wasn't yet legal, and I wasn't nearly as alone or helpless as they believed. At a red light, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd memorized from the Seattle law firm. It was after hours, but I left a detailed message confirming my identity and very much alive status. Then I called James Patterson, Frank's old friend from his construction days, who'd become a successful attorney. We hadn't spoken since the funeral, but he'd pressed his card into my hand that day and said, "If you ever need anything, Eleanor, anything at all." "James," I said when he answered. "It's Eleanor. I'm sorry to bother you on Thanksgiving, but I need your help. It seems my family is trying to have me declared incompetent and steal everything Frank and I worked for." His response was immediate and fierce. "I'll clear my schedule Monday morning. Nobody messes with Frank's widow on my watch." As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed Mrs. Chen from next door taking out her trash. We'd barely spoken beyond polite nods, but something made me stop. "Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having some trouble with my family. If anyone comes asking about me, could you be careful what you say?" Her eyes sharpened with understanding. "Family trouble is the worst trouble," she said in accented English. "You need help, you ask. My daughter is a doctor. A real doctor, not like some who forget their oath." I wasn't as alone as they'd made me feel, and Sarah was about to learn that while she'd been studying medicine, I'd been studying something far more valuable: survival. The game was on, and I intended to win. The week after Thanksgiving, I underwent a transformation that would have made Frank proud. Gone was Eleanor the doormat, Eleanor the perpetual giver, Eleanor the easily manipulated widow. In her place rose someone I'd forgotten existed. The woman who'd worked 3 jobs while pregnant, who'd fought insurance companies for Frank's cancer treatment, who'd survived on 4 hours of sleep for years to give her daughter a better life. That woman knew how to fight. She'd just forgotten she had claws. My first stop was James Patterson's office in the city. The building was all glass and steel, a far cry from the construction sites where he and Frank had met 40 years ago. But when he greeted me in the lobby, his hug was the same warm embrace I remembered from better days. "Eleanor, you look ready for battle," he observed, leading me to his office. "I've been at war for years, James. I just didn't know it until now." His office commanded a view of the river where Frank had proposed to me. I told James everything, laying out the photos from Sarah's file, the recordings of my discoveries, the cruel text that had finally opened my eyes. His expression grew darker with each revelation. "This is criminal," he said flatly. "Drugging you, forging documents, stealing mail. We're looking at multiple felonies here. But Eleanor, I need to ask, do you want to send your daughter to prison?" I stared at the river, remembering Sarah's tiny hand in mine as we fed ducks from this very shore. "I want her to face consequences, real ones. But more than that, I want my life back. I want my dignity back. And I want to ensure she can never do this to anyone else." "Then we proceed strategically." James nodded. "First, we need to establish your complete mental competence. I'm sending you to Dr. Monica Richardson. She's the best geriatric psychiatrist in the state, and more importantly, she's dealt with cases like this before." Dr. Richardson's office was nothing like the cold institutions I'd imagined. Warm and welcoming, with photos of her own grandchildren on the desk, she listened to my story with professional calm that couldn't quite hide her disgust. "Elder abuse through gaslighting is more common than people think," she explained after putting me through a battery of cognitive tests, "especially when money is involved. Your results show no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. In fact, you scored exceptionally well, especially considering the stress you've been under." She provided me with a detailed report and agreed to testify if needed. More importantly, she ran blood tests that confirmed traces of benzodiazepines, the Xanax Sarah and Dorothy had been slipping me. This level wasn't enough to cause serious harm, she assured me, but it would certainly make you seem confused and drowsy. Combined with gaslighting tactics, it's a sophisticated form of abuse. Armed with medical proof of my competence and evidence of drugging, James and I moved to the next phase. He recommended a private investigator named Robert Sullivan, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes. "I need everything," I told Robert in our first meeting. "Every skeleton in their closets, every lie they've told, every dollar they've stolen." Robert was thorough. Within 2 weeks, he'd uncovered a web of deception that went far beyond what I'd imagined. Marcus wasn't just between jobs. He'd been fired for embezzling from his company, and they'd agreed not to prosecute if he paid back the money. The $100,000 he'd borrowed from Dorothy supposedly paid back, but actually funding his gambling addiction. Dorothy's charitable foundation, where she served as president and loved to brag about her philanthropic work, Robert found evidence of skimming that went back years. Donations meant for underprivileged children had been funding her shopping trips and cosmetic procedures. "She's been careful," Robert explained, showing me spreadsheets that made my head spin. Small amounts from multiple sources, but it adds up to nearly $500,000 over the past decade. "What about Sarah?" I asked, dreading the answer but needing to know. "Your daughter has been taking money from elderly patients' families. Not directly, she's too smart for that. But she accepts gifts in exchange for expedited care or favorable medical reports. She's also been billing insurance for procedures never performed using her elderly patients who she assumes won't check their statements." Each revelation felt like another death, another burial of the daughter I thought I'd raised. But with grief came clarity and determination. While Robert continued his investigation, I put on my best performance yet. I rejoined family dinners, acting slightly more confused each time. I let Dorothy make me tea and pretended to drink it all. I asked the same questions twice, forgot important dates, and occasionally called Marcus by Frank's name. Poor Mom. I heard Sarah sigh to her friend Louise during a Sunday brunch I'd attended. "It's happening faster than we expected. Last week, she tried to pay for groceries with expired coupons and got so confused when they wouldn't take them. Another lie. I hadn't used coupons in years. But while I played the declining elder, I was actually building my case and my future. The inheritance from Frank's brother Richard was even more substantial than Sarah had mentioned. Nearly $600,000, not counting the value of his Seattle property. He never forgot how Frank helped him when he was down, Richard's lawyer explained over the phone. He always meant to reconcile but was too proud. Leaving everything to you was his way of making amends. I flew to Seattle under the pretense of visiting a fictional cousin. In reality, I was securing my inheritance and setting up new bank accounts where Sarah couldn't touch them. Richard's house was beautiful, a craftsman cottage with a view of the Sound. Standing in his garden, I felt Frank's presence strongly. "What do you think, honey?" I whispered to the wind. "Should I start over here?" The wind chimed through a set of bells Richard had hung, sounding almost like Frank's laugh. I took it as a yes. Back home, I began systematically protecting my assets. The $360,000 house posed the biggest challenge, but James found our solution in the original deed. "You were smart to insist on this clause," he said, pointing to the relevant section. "Return to grantor upon breach of trust. We can argue that using the property to facilitate elder abuse constitutes such a breach." I also started reaching out to others who might have been victims. At the senior center, I casually mentioned Dorothy's charity work and wasn't surprised when several people shared stories of donations that seemed to disappear. Dr. Richardson had put me in touch with a support group for elder abuse victims, and there I found 2 other families who'd had suspicious dealings with Dr. Harrison. He declared my mother incompetent after one 15-minute visit, Grace Morrison told me. She was grieving my father, not senile, but my brother wanted her house. We began meeting quietly, sharing evidence and resources. What had felt like my isolated shame became collective strength. The hardest part was Tommy. My grandson, now 16 and perceptive, had noticed the changes in family dynamics. One afternoon when I was babysitting, Sarah still trusted me alone with him, convinced I was too far gone to influence him. He confronted me directly. "Grandma, why is everyone acting so weird? Mom keeps saying you're sick, but you seem fine to me." I made a calculated decision. Tommy was old enough for truth, and he deserved better than the legacy of lies his parents were creating. "Your mom thinks I'm getting old and confused," I said carefully. "Sometimes families disagree about these things." "But you're not confused," he insisted. "You remember everything about Grandpa, all my school stuff, even helped me with calculus. Mrs. Peterson down the street has dementia, and she's nothing like you." "What do you think is happening?" I asked, curious about his perspective. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. "I think Mom and Dad want your money, and I think Grandma Dorothy is helping them. I heard them talking about some home they want to put you in." "And how do you feel about that?" "It's wrong," he burst out. "You're my grandma. You taught me to ride a bike and make Grandpa's special pancakes. You're the only one who really listens when I talk. I don't want you to go anywhere." I hugged him tight, feeling the first warm crack in the ice around my heart. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. But things might get complicated soon. Can I count on you to remember that I love you no matter what happens?" "I love you too, Grandma, and I'll remember the truth even if everyone else lies." That conversation gave me strength for what came next. Christmas was approaching, and I knew Sarah's plan was accelerating. She'd started making noises about power of attorney, suggesting I might feel safer with someone else handling my finances. Dorothy had increased her visits, always armed with her special tea. Marcus had begun documenting every interaction, his phone constantly recording. I let them think they were winning. I signed where Sarah asked me to sign, on documents James had already ensured were legally meaningless without proper witnesses. I nodded vaguely when Dorothy suggested Sunset Manor might be just the place for a nice rest. I even packed a small bag which Sarah discovered with poorly concealed glee. "She's already preparing," I heard her whisper to Marcus. Maybe she knows on some level that she needs help. What Sarah didn't know was that the bag contained evidence Robert had gathered copies of all my new legal documents and a recorder that had captured every conversation in that house for the past month. 3 days before Christmas, everything was in place. James had filed the necessary paperwork. Robert had compiled enough evidence to bury them all. Dr. Richardson had agreed to be on standby. The FBI had opened an investigation into Dorothy's foundation based on our tips. And I sat in my small apartment looking at the Christmas decorations I hadn't bothered to put up and felt something I hadn't experienced in years' hope. The phone rang at 10 that night. Sarah, her voice dripping with false concern. "Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe you shouldn't come to Christmas dinner. It might be too overwhelming with all the people. Dorothy mentioned she's happy to make you a plate and bring it by later." "Oh," I said, letting disappointment color my voice. "But I always come to Christmas dinner." "I know, but we have to think about what's best for you. Actually, can you check your phone? I sent you a text earlier about it." I looked at my phone knowing what I'd find. The cruel message that had started my journey from victim to victor. As I reread it, I felt not pain, but power. They'd put their cruelty in writing, given me the very weapon I'd use against them. "All right." I typed back that single word carrying more weight than they could imagine. "Thanks for understanding, Mom. We'll see you soon to discuss next steps." After I hung up, I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Frank would have recognized it from the time I'd dealt with the contractor who tried to cheat us on our roof repair. Sarah had never seen this version of her mother. She was about to meet her. The text arrived at 4 a.m. on December 22nd, just as Sarah had mentioned on the phone. But seeing it in writing, seeing the casual cruelty laid out in black and white, hit differently. I sat in my cold apartment wrapped in Frank's old robe and read it again. Mom, I know you paid $360,000 for this house, but my mother-in-law doesn't want you at Christmas dinner. Not, we decided, or we think it's best. No, Sarah had thrown Dorothy under the bus while hiding behind her shadow. The cowardice of it struck me anew. My daughter couldn't even own her cruelty. I'd already responded with, all right, but Sarah wasn't done. The messages kept coming, each one a masterpiece of manipulation. I know this is hard, but we have to think about your well-being. You've seemed so tired lately. Maybe after the holidays we can talk about getting you some help. Dr. Harrison comes highly recommended. Marcus and I only want what's best for you. You know that, right? I didn't respond to any of them. Let her stew in my silence. Let her wonder if her drugged, confused mother had even understood. By noon, she was panicking. The texts increased in frequency and desperation. Mom, did you get my messages? I'm worried about you. Please respond. I'm thinking of coming by to check on you. That last one made me act. I couldn't have her showing up and finding me clear-eyed and preparing for war. I sent back, sorry dear, was sleeping, very tired, see you after Christmas. Her response was immediate and relieved. Oh good, yes, get lots of rest. We'll bring you some leftovers. Leftovers. From the dinner in the house I'd bought with my dead husband's insurance money. The symbolism was too perfect. What Sarah didn't know was that her cruel text had pushed others into action too. I'd forwarded it to Tommy earlier that morning along with a simple message. They don't want me at Christmas. I wanted you to know I love you no matter what. His response had been swift and furious. This is BS, Grandma. I'm coming to see you. No, sweetheart. Play along for now, but remember what we talked about. I hate this. I know, but trust your grandma. I've got more fight in me than they think. And I did. James had accelerated our timeline based on the text. This gives us documented proof of emotional abuse, he'd explained. Combined with everything else, it's damning. I spent December 22nd making phone calls. The Seattle lawyers were ready to transfer Richard's inheritance into my new accounts. Dr. Richardson had written a supplementary report about the psychological impact of being excluded from family gatherings. Robert had uncovered more dirt. Apparently, Dorothy had been telling her society friends that I was already in a home setting the stage for my disappearance. But the most important call was to someone I hadn't expected to contact Patricia, Dorothy's sister. Patricia and Dorothy had always been competitive, but I'd noticed cracks in their relationship lately. Dorothy had made one too many snide comments about Patricia's husband's business failures, had flaunted her wealth a bit too obviously at Patricia's modest birthday party. Patricia, it's Eleanor. I hope I'm not bothering you. There was a pause. Eleanor, Dorothy said you were unwell. That's actually why I'm calling. I need to tell someone the truth before it's too late. I laid out everything. The drugging, the gaslighting, the planned institutionalization. Patricia listened in silence until I finished. That explains so much, she said finally. Dorothy's been acting strangely about money lately, secretive, and she mentioned something about finally being able to renovate her kitchen after New Year's. I wondered where the money was coming from. It's coming from me, I said flatly, or it was supposed to. Eleanor, I owe you an apology. I believed her lies about you, but this is criminal. Yes, it is, and I'm going to stop it. But I could use an ally who knows Dorothy's weak spots. Patricia's laugh was bitter. Oh, I know them all. Did you know she's terrified of scandal? Their mother once said Dorothy would rather die than be embarrassed publicly. She's built her entire identity on being the perfect society matron. Perfect. Public humiliation it would be then. December 23rd brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Chen from next door knocked on my door with a container of homemade dumplings and a concerned expression. "You look too thin," she announced, pushing past me into my kitchen. "And your daughter, she came here yesterday asking questions. I told her nothing, just like you asked. But she tried to make me think you were crazy." "What did she say?" "She asked if I'd noticed you wandering at night talking to yourself, forgetting to take in mail. She said she was worried, but her eyes—" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "I know worried. That wasn't worried. That was hunting." "Thank you for not telling her anything." Mrs. Chen waved off my gratitude. "My mother-in-law tried something similar with me 40 years ago. Said I was unfit mother, tried to take my children. I recognize the signs. You need help." "I have lawyers," I assured her. "Good. But you also need witnesses. Good neighbors who see you every day, who know you're not crazy. I'll talk to others in the building. Mrs. Garcia in 3B, her daughter, is social worker. Mr. Johnson in 4C, he's retired police. We all know you, Eleanor. We see you go to work, bring groceries, help with building cleanup. Not the actions of a confused old woman." By that evening, I had a small army of neighbors ready to testify to my mental competence. Sarah's fishing expedition had backfired spectacularly. That night, Tommy called. I could hear the chaos of his household in the background. Dorothy's imperious voice directing decorating Marcus, cursing about something Sarah's forced cheerfulness. "Grandma," he whispered, "they're planning something for the 26th. I heard Mom on the phone with some doctor. She said something about having you evaluated and getting emergency custody. Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. Are you okay?" "No," he said, his voice cracking. "This isn't right. You're the only normal person in this family. Well, you and Grandpa were. I miss him." "I miss him too, but you know what he'd say? 'Patterson men don't start fights, but they sure as hell finish them,'" Tommy quoted, and I could hear Frank's influence in his voice. "Language," I admonished gently. "But yes, and Patterson women were even tougher. You just watch." Christmas Eve day, I attended the early church service. Same church where Frank and I had married, where Sarah had been baptized, where we'd held Frank's funeral. Pastor Williams greeted me warmly, no sign that he'd heard any rumors about my supposed decline. After the service, I lingered admiring the poinsettias I donated in Frank's memory. That's when I overheard them, 2 women from Dorothy's book club whispering in the vestibule. "Did you hear about poor Eleanor? Dorothy says she's deteriorating rapidly." Such a shame, though Dorothy is being so wonderful taking care of everything. She'll make sure Eleanor gets the best care. That Sunset Manor is supposed to be excellent. "When are they moving her?" "Right after Christmas, I heard. They don't want to disrupt the holidays." I stepped into view, noting with satisfaction how they paled. "Ladies, Merry Christmas." "Eleanor," one gasped. "We didn't. That is, how are you feeling?" "Never better," I said pleasantly. Though I'm curious why Dorothy is discussing my health with her book club, especially since I just had a full evaluation that confirmed I'm in excellent cognitive shape. They exchanged panicked looks. "We must have misunderstood." "Must have," I agreed. You know how stories get twisted. Why someone might think Dorothy was spreading lies about me to cover up something criminal. But surely that's not the case. I left them there frantically texting, "Let Dorothy deal with that little fire." Christmas Eve evening was typically my favorite time. Frank and I used to drive around looking at lights, stopping for hot chocolate, making plans for the coming year. This year I sat alone in my apartment, but I wasn't sad. I was ready. At 9 o'clock my phone rang, Sarah sounding frazzled. Mom, someone told Dorothy you were at church today saying strange things. I attended Christmas Eve service and wished people Merry Christmas. Is that strange? No, but you said something about criminal behavior. Did I? I can't recall. You know how confused I get. Mom, this isn't funny. We're trying to help you. By excluding me from Christmas dinner. Silence. Then, that's for your own good. You get overwhelmed in crowds. Since when I worked in hospitals for 40 years, Sarah, crowds don't bother me. You're not yourself lately, she insisted. The mom I knew would understand we're doing this out of love. The daughter I raised would have included me out of love, I countered. But here we are. I'll come by tomorrow with your presents, she said, switching tactics. We can have our own little celebration. No need, I have plans. Plans? What plans? Does it matter I'm not welcome at family Christmas, remember? I hung up on her protests. Let her wonder what her crazy mother was up to. In truth, my plans were simple. James and his wife had invited me to their Christmas dinner, refusing to let me spend the day alone. But more importantly, everything was set for December 26th. The day they planned to lock me away would instead be the day I reclaimed my life. I pulled out the photo album I'd grabbed from the house during one of my visits. Pictures of Sarah growing up of Frank, teaching her to ride a bike of family Christmases when love was real and untainted by greed. In one photo, Sarah, aged 7, grinned gap-toothed at the camera wearing the paper crown from a Christmas cracker. She'd written in crayon on the back, "I love you, Mommy. You're the best mommy in the whole world." I traced those misspelled words and wondered when that little girl had died, or if she'd ever really existed at all. The clock struck midnight. Christmas Day, the last Christmas I'd spend as Eleanor the victim. By tomorrow night, I'd be Eleanor the Phoenix, risen from the ashes of their betrayal. "Merry Christmas, Frank," I whispered to his photo. "Watch over me tomorrow. It's going to be one hell of a show." Outside snow began to fall, blanketing the world in deceptive purity, but I knew better now, knew that the cleanest snow could hide the darkest dirt. Tomorrow I'd expose it all. Tonight, though, I slept better than I had in months. The sleep of the righteous, the sleep of the prepared, the sleep of a woman who'd finally remembered how to fight. Christmas Eve service had always been sacred to our family. For 40 years, Frank and I had sat in the same pew, third from the front on the left side. Even after he died, I maintained our tradition, feeling his presence strongest in that holy space where we'd exchanged our vows. This year felt different. This year, I walked into St. Andrew's not as Eleanor the grieving widow or Eleanor the devoted grandmother, but as Eleanor the warrior preparing for battle. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. The navy suit Sarah had given me for my 60th birthday, pearl earrings from Frank, and the brooch with the hidden camera Robert had procured for me. The church was packed with familiar faces, many of whom quickly looked away when they saw me. Dorothy's poison had spread far, but I held my head high and took my usual seat, nodding pleasantly to those brave enough to meet my eyes. I wasn't expecting them to show up. Sarah had been clear about not wanting me at family gatherings, but 15 minutes into the service, I heard the distinctive click of Dorothy's heels on marble. The entire family filed in, Dorothy leading like a queen, Marcus and Sarah behind her, Tommy bringing up the rear. They sat directly across from me, and I felt, rather than saw, the collective intake of breath from the congregation. The excluded grandmother sitting alone while her family clustered together. The optics were exactly what Dorothy wanted. But Tommy, my dear, brave boy, locked eyes with me and started to move. Sarah grabbed his arm, hissing something, but he shook her off. In front of everyone, he crossed the aisle and slid into the pew beside me. "Hi, Grandma," he said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I replied, pulling him close. Sarah's face flushed red. Marcus half stood, but Dorothy's manicured hand on his arm stopped him. They wouldn't make a scene not here. But I saw Dorothy's lips thin into a line that promised retribution. Throughout the service, Tommy held my hand. During the prayer, he whispered, I told them I'd call the police if they tried to stop me, said I'd report them for elder abuse. My grandson, the unexpected ally, Frank would have been so proud. When Pastor Williams called for the lighting of candles, Tommy helped me stand. As the flame passed from person to person, illuminating faces in the darkness, I caught Sarah watching us. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt, regret. But Dorothy leaned over and whispered something, and Sarah's expression hardened again. After the service, the congregation filed out slowly, many stopping to greet neighbors and wish them well. I took my time letting Tommy fill me in on school, his girlfriend, his plans for college. Normal grandmother-grandson conversation that seemed to infuriate Sarah more with each passing minute. Eleanor. Pastor Williams approached beaming. Wonderful to see you. And Tommy. Your grandmother tells me you're doing excellently in school. Top of my class, Tommy confirmed proudly. Grandma's been helping me with my college essays. She's really good at editing. She always was sharp, Pastor Williams agreed. I remember when she organized that fundraiser for the new roof. Most efficient committee chair we ever had. I saw several people nearby perk up at this. Not quite the confused elder Dorothy had been describing. That was just last year, I said modestly, though it feels like yesterday. Time does fly. Will we see you at the New Year's service? Wouldn't miss it, I assured him. Sarah finally couldn't stand it anymore. She approached with Marcus flanking her, Dorothy hanging back but watching intently. Tommy, we need to go, she said tightly. Now. I'm talking to Pastor Williams, Tommy replied calmly. It's rude to interrupt. Thomas Michael, don't test me. Actually, I interjected smoothly, I was hoping to discuss something with you, Sarah, privately. She glanced around at the curious faces trapped by social convention. Fine. 5 minutes. I led her to the small prayer chapel, noting how Marcus started to follow before Dorothy called him back. Inside, surrounded by stained glass and silence, I faced my daughter. What are you playing at? She demanded immediately. You know you're not supposed to. That is, we agreed you wouldn't come to family events. No, you told me I wasn't welcome. There's a difference. Mom, you're not well. This confusion, this aggressive behavior. Stop. My voice cut through her performance like a blade. There's no one here to fool Sarah. No witnesses to gaslight. Just you and me and the truth. She actually stepped back. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. But let me be clear. I know everything. The drugging, the fake doctor's notes, the plan to lock me away, the inheritance you've been stealing. All of it. Her face went through a series of expressions. Shock, fear, calculation, and finally defiance. You're delusional. This is exactly why we're concerned. Is that why you've been intercepting mail from Richard's lawyers? Because I'm delusional. That hit home. Her eyes widened before she caught herself. I don't know what you're talking about. Seattle law firm, Hanson Bridges and Associates, $587,000 and a house. Ring any bells? How did you... She cut herself off, but it was too late. How did I find out by not being the confused old woman you've been trying to create? I've spoken to them, Sarah. The money is already transferred to accounts you can't touch. That money should go to your family, she said desperately. To Tommy's education, to Marcus's gambling debts, to Dorothy's shopping sprees, to your kitchen renovation. I shook my head. No, Sarah. That money is mine. Just like the house you're living in is mine. You gave us that house. I bought it and let you live there. Very different things. And considering you've used it as a base to plan my imprisonment, I think our arrangement needs reconsidering. Real panic flashed across her face then. Mom, let's not be hasty. We can work this out. Maybe we overreacted about Christmas dinner. Why don't you come tomorrow? Dorothy won't mind. The reversal was so abrupt it might have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Oh, Sarah, do you really think I'm that easily manipulated? I'm your daughter. She tried tears forming. I wondered if they were real or part of the performance. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything, I said quietly. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar saved and opportunity missed. It all meant everything because I loved you more than life itself. But you killed that love with betrayal. I never meant... Yes, you did. Every forged document, every drugged cup of tea, every lie you told about me. You meant all of it. The tears were flowing freely now, but her eyes remained calculating, still performing, still scheming. What are you going to do? I smiled then, and she flinched. What any self-respecting woman would do. Protect myself, reclaim what's mine, and ensure you face consequences for your actions. You'd destroy your own daughter, your own grandson's mother. You destroyed your mother first. I'm just returning the favor. As for Tommy, he's already chosen his side. He's ashamed of you, Sarah, and you have no one to blame but yourself. I turned to leave, but her hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Her grip was desperate, painful. Please, Mom, I'll do anything. We can forget this happened. Start over. I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. Then I remembered the file labeled Mom's Decline and shook her off. Some things can't be forgotten, Sarah, and starting over, that's exactly what I plan to do, without you. I left her there in the chapel and returned to find Tommy waiting anxiously by the door. The rest of the family had left, probably Dorothy's decision to avoid further scene. You okay, Grandma? Better than I've been in years, I assured him, linking my arm through his. Can I give you a ride home? In the car, Tommy was quiet for a while. Then, Mom's going to flip out. Probably. Are you really going to be okay? They're planning something bad. I know what they're planning, I said gently, and I'm prepared. But Tommy, things are going to get ugly for a while. You might hear terrible things about me. Your parents might try to turn you against me. They already have, he said flatly. Dad offered to buy me a car if I'd sign something saying you were confused. Mom cried and said I was breaking her heart by taking your side. And I told them Grandpa would be ashamed of them. Dad got so mad he punched a wall. I pulled into their driveway, noting the lit windows and shadows moving behind curtains. They were waiting for him. Tommy, I want you to know that whatever happens, I love you, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming. He hugged me fiercely. I love you too, Grandma. And when I turn 18 next year, I want to live with you, if you'll have me. Always, I promised. Now go inside. Play along as much as you need to stay safe. This will all be over soon. As he walked to the door, it flew open. Sarah stood silhouetted against the light, and even from the car I could see her fury. But Tommy squared his shoulders and walked past her without a word. My grandson, Frank's legacy, the one good thing to come from this mess. I drove home through streets lined with Christmas lights, each house a promise of family gatherings I'd no longer be part of. But instead of sadness, I felt liberation. Tomorrow they'd expect to find me alone and vulnerable, ready to be carted off to their chosen prison. Tomorrow they'd learn exactly how wrong they were. The war was about to begin, and I had the advantage they'd never expected. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. They'd taken my trust, my love, my sacrifice, and twisted them into weapons against me. But in doing so, they'd freed me from the chains of obligation and guilt. I was no longer the mother who gave everything. I was the woman who would take it all back. With interest. The clock on my dashboard showed 11:45, 15 minutes until Christmas Day. I thought of Sarah probably ranting to Dorothy about my aggressive behavior at church, of Marcus calculating how quickly they could move against me, of Dorothy scheming in her silk pajamas, confident in her victory. Let them plan. Let them scheme. In 24 hours, their world would come crashing down and I'd be standing in the rubble, finally free. "Merry Christmas to me," I whispered, pulling into my apartment complex. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight I'd sleep the sleep of the righteous, the sleep of a woman who'd finally learned to save herself. December 26th dawned crisp and bright, the kind of winter morning Frank used to call diamond days for the way sunlight fractured through frost. I'd been awake since 4, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Today, the house of cards my family had built would come tumbling down. James had coordinated everything with military precision. By 7 in the morning, I was sitting in his office with Robert Sullivan and 2 FBI agents who'd been investigating Dorothy's foundation. The amount of evidence spread across the conference table was staggering. "Mrs. Patterson." Agent Martinez began. "Based on what Mr. Sullivan has uncovered, we have enough to arrest Dorothy Whitman on multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. But we need your cooperation to ensure she doesn't have time to hide assets or destroy evidence." "What do you need me to do?" "Go about your normal routine. We understand they're planning to have you evaluated today." I nodded. "My daughter mentioned Dr. Harrison would be making a house call this afternoon." "Perfect," Agent Chen said. "We'll be there first. Dr. Harrison is already in custody, by the way. He broke down completely when faced with the evidence. Turns out your family wasn't his only victim." My phone buzzed. "Sarah, right on schedule. Mom, we're concerned about yesterday. Marcus and I are coming by at 2 with a friend who wants to help. Please be home." I showed the agents the text. The friend would be Dr. Harrison. "Reply normally," Martinez instructed. "We need them to think everything is going according to plan." I typed back, "Of course, dear. I'll make tea." James squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing great, Eleanor. By tonight, this will all be over." But first, there was one more performance to give. I returned home to find my apartment building buzzing with unusual activity. Mrs. Chen was in the lobby with several neighbors, and they all turned when I entered. "Eleanor," Mrs. Garcia called out, "we've been organizing. If anyone tries to take you somewhere against your will, they'll have to go through all of us." Mr. Johnson, the retired cop, nodded grimly. "Chen told us everything. Elder abuse on our watch, not happening." I was touched beyond words. These people I'd barely known had become my protective wall. "Thank you, but it's being handled. Just, if you see anything unusual today, document it." "Already got my camera ready," Chen said, patting her phone. "That daughter of yours shows up, she's going to be internet famous for all the wrong reasons." I spent the morning making the preparations James had suggested. Important documents went into a safety deposit box at the bank. Sentimental items I couldn't bear to lose were quietly moved to James's office, and I made sure my brooch camera was fully charged and positioned perfectly. At 1 o'clock, Tommy called. "Grandma, they're getting ready to leave. Mom's nervous. She keeps changing clothes and practicing what she's going to say." "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "I'm at my friend Jake's house. Told them I had a project due. I don't want to watch them do this to you." "That's fine. Stay where you are. It'll all be over soon." "Promise you'll be okay?" "I promise. Your grandma's tougher than she looks." At 1:45, I set out the tea service with my best china. Not grandmother's set Sarah had given away, but a new set I'd bought myself. Earl Grey for me and a special blend for my guests. Nothing drugged, of course. I wasn't them. The knock came precisely at 2. I opened the door to find Sarah and Marcus flanking a man I'd never seen before, younger than I'd expected, with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. "Mom," Sarah said, her smile as false as her concern. "This is Dr. Harrison. He's here to help." The man's eyes widened slightly. Whoever he wasn't Dr. Harrison, which meant the real doctor had already given up his co-conspirators. "How lovely," I said warmly. "Please come in. I've made tea." They filed in the fake doctor, glancing around nervously. Marcus immediately began recording on his phone, not even trying to be subtle about it. "Mrs. Patterson," the imposter began, "I understand there have been some concerns about your well-being." "Have there?" I asked innocently. "I feel perfectly fine, though I was hurt about being excluded from Christmas dinner." Sarah jumped in quickly. "That was a misunderstanding, Mom. We were just worried about overwhelming you." "Ah, yes. The text you sent at 4 a.m. mentioned Dorothy didn't want me there. Very considerate of her to worry about overwhelming me in the house I bought." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The fake doctor pulled out some forms. "Perhaps we could start with a few simple questions, just to establish baseline cognitive function." "Of course," I agreed. "But first, could I see your identification? I don't believe we've met before." The man fumbled for his wallet, producing an ID that probably wouldn't fool a teenager. I pretended to study it carefully. "Dr. Harrison, you look so much younger than your website photo. What's your secret?" "Good genes," he mumbled. "Fascinating. And where did you do your residency again? Sarah mentioned you trained together, but she was at Johns Hopkins, and I don't recall her mentioning you." Sarah's face was turning red. "Mom, why are you being so difficult?" "I'm not being difficult, dear. Just careful. You understand with all the elder abuse stories in the news. Why, just last week there was that terrible case where a family tried to have a perfectly competent parent locked away to steal their money." "That's not what's happening here," Marcus said tightly. "Of course not," I agreed. "You'd never drug someone's tea or forge documents or intercept their mail. That would be criminal." The fake doctor stood abruptly. "I don't think this is—" That's when the door opened. Agent Martinez and Agent Chen entered, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Nobody move," Martinez commanded, showing his badge. "FBI, we have warrants." Sarah's face went white. "What is this, Mom? What did you do?" "I protected myself," I said calmly. "Something I should have done years ago." The fake doctor tried to bolt but didn't make it 2 steps before Chen had him in cuffs. "Impersonating a physician, attempted fraud conspiracy to commit elder abuse. You're going to have a very bad day, sir." Marcus dropped his phone, hands shaking. "We want a lawyer." "You'll need one." Martinez agreed. "Marcus Whitman, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Sarah Whitman, you're under arrest for elder abuse, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." As they read them their rights, Sarah stared at me with a mixture of shock and betrayal that might have been funny if it weren't so sad. "You're my mother," she whispered. "How could you do this to me?" "You were my daughter," I replied. "How could you do this to me?" They were led out in handcuffs past the gathering crowd of neighbors who documented every moment. Mrs. Chen gave me a subtle thumbs up as the police cars pulled away. But the day wasn't over. An hour later, I stood outside Dorothy's mansion with James and the FBI agents. She'd been hosting her post-Christmas brunch, the one I'd never been invited to when they arrived. I stayed in the car, but I had a perfect view of Dorothy being led out in handcuffs, her perfect makeup running as she sobbed about the indignity. Her society friends scattered like roaches in sunlight, none of them willing to be associated with scandal. Patricia, Dorothy's sister, emerged behind her and walked straight to my car. I rolled down the window. "Eleanor, I'm sorry for everything. I should have seen it sooner." "What will you do now?" I asked. "Clean up this mess. Try to salvage something of the foundation for the kids who really need it. And make sure Dorothy pays back every penny she stole." "And Tommy?" Patricia's expression softened. "That boy loves you fiercely. When the dust settles, I hope you'll let me help ensure he's taken care of. He deserves better than the parents he got." As the cavalcade of police cars pulled away, I felt something release in my chest. The weight I'd carried for so long, the constant vigilance, the fear, all of it lifted like fog in sunlight. James drove me home where I found Tommy waiting on my doorstep with a duffel bag. "Mom's in jail," he said simply. "Dad too. I know I'm supposed to be upset, but..." He shrugged. "I'm just relieved. Is that terrible?" "No, sweetheart. That's honest. Come inside." Over hot chocolate, made with real chocolate, not the sugar-free stuff Sarah insisted on, I explained what would happen next. The trials, the media attention, the likelihood that his parents would face serious jail time. "Where will I live?" he asked, trying to sound casual about it. "Well, your Aunt Patricia has offered to take temporary guardianship, but when you turn 18 in a few months, you can make your own choices." "I already know my choice," he said firmly, "if you'll have me." "Always," I promised, though I should mention I'm thinking of moving. "Where?" "Seattle. Your great-uncle Richard left me a house there. It has a view of the water and a garden Frank would have loved. Plus, the University of Washington has an excellent engineering program." Tommy's eyes lit up. A fresh start. For both of us. That evening, as Tommy helped me pack some initial boxes, my phone rang constantly. Media requests, distant relatives suddenly concerned about my well-being, friends of Sarah's fishing for gossip. I ignored them all. But one call I did take from Dr. Monica Richardson. "Eleanor, I heard the news. I wanted you to know how proud I am of you. What you did took incredible courage." "It took desperation," I corrected. "But thank you. I also wanted to let you know about something. The Elder Abuse Support Group, they want to give you their Advocacy Award. You've inspired a lot of people to fight back." I thought about it. "I'll accept on one condition. The award goes to establishing a fund for other victims. Call it Frank's Fund after my husband. He always said I should stand up for myself more." "That's beautiful, Eleanor. He'd be proud." As night fell, Tommy and I sat in my small living room surrounded by boxes and possibilities. The apartment that had felt like exile now felt like a launching pad. "Grandma," Tommy said quietly, "do you think they'll learn from this, Mom and Dad? I considered the question carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some people learn from consequences, others just blame everyone else. But that's not our concern anymore. Our job is to build something better from the ashes they left behind." He nodded, wise beyond his years. "Grandpa would have liked that. Building something better." "Yes," I agreed, looking at Frank's photo on the mantel. "He would have." Tomorrow would bring lawyers and logistics, media, and mess. But tonight, I had my grandson safe beside me, my freedom secured, and my future wide open. The woman who'd entered December as a victim would leave it as a victor. And that, I thought, as Tommy dozed off against my shoulder, was the best Christmas gift I could have given myself. The unraveling was complete. Now it was time to weave something new. 6 months later, I stood in the garden of Richard's Seattle house, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. The rhododendrons were in full bloom, their purple petals reminding me of the corsage Frank had given me for our first dance. Tommy was inside video chatting with his girlfriend back in Pennsylvania, while simultaneously working on his college applications. The trials had been swift and decisive. Sarah got 5 years for elder abuse and fraud, Marcus 7 for his additional embezzlement charges. Dorothy, faced with decades of evidence, plea bargained her way to 10 years, but would likely serve 6 with good behavior. The headlines had been sensational. Prominent doctor drugs, own mother for inheritance, and society matron's charity scam. Exposed by daughter-in-law she tried to destroy. I'd testified at each trial wearing Frank's favorite pearl necklace for strength. Sarah had wept throughout my testimony, whether from genuine remorse or the harsh reality of consequences I couldn't tell. She'd tried to catch my eye several times, but I focused on the prosecutor's questions and the truth that needed telling. Marcus had been defiant to the end, claiming I'd manipulated everyone. The jury didn't buy it, especially after hearing the recordings I'd made of their planning sessions. Dorothy had maintained her imperious attitude until the judge read her sentence. Then she'd collapsed the facade, finally cracking as bailiffs led her away. But that was the past. Today was about the future. "Grandma," Tommy called from the house. "Aunt Patricia's here." Patricia had surprised everyone by becoming a fierce advocate for elder rights. She'd liquidated Dorothy's assets, paid back every penny stolen from the charity, and established a legitimate foundation in its place. We'd become unlikely allies bonded by our shared determination to right the wrongs. "Eleanor." She greeted me warmly, carrying a bottle of wine in a bakery box. "I brought that salmon you like from Pike Place Market." We'd established this weekly dinner tradition, building the family connection that Dorothy's toxicity had poisoned. Patricia's husband, freed from Dorothy's constant criticism, had turned his business around and often joined us with stories that made Tommy laugh until his sides hurt. "Any news from the prison?" I asked as we set the table. Patricia's expression tightened. "Sarah's in therapy, genuinely this time. She sent another letter. I'd received 12 letters from Sarah so far. Long, rambling things that veered between self-pity and what might have been genuine awakening. I kept them in a box unread beyond the first few lines. Maybe someday I'd be ready. Not today. And Dorothy, still insisting she's the victim. But her cellmate is apparently a grandmother who was swindled by her own son, so karma has a sense of humor. Tommy joined us for dinner, full of excitement about his engineering program acceptance. He'd graduated as valedictorian, his speech about choosing integrity over family loyalty, bringing the audience to tears. I'd never been prouder. "Jake's mom wants to know if you'll speak at their senior center next month," he told me between bites. "About recognizing elder abuse signs." I'd become an unexpected speaker on the circuit, sharing my story with various groups. The Franks Fund had helped 17 families so far, providing legal aid and safe housing for elderly victims of family abuse. "Tell her yes," I said. "Though I might bring Mrs. Chen. She's better at the warning signs part." Mrs. Chen had moved to Seattle a month after us, claiming she'd always wanted to see the Space Needle. She lived in a charming apartment 10 minutes away and had already organized the entire building into a vigilant network of mutual care. After dinner, we sat on the deck despite the cool evening, wrapped in blankets and contentment. The doorbell rang unexpected at this hour. Tommy went to answer it, returning with an odd expression and a FedEx envelope. "It's from some law firm in Switzerland." I opened it carefully, scanning the contents. Then I read it again, sure I'd misunderstood. "What is it?" Patricia asked. "It's..." Frank had a life insurance policy I didn't know about, through his union. They've been trying to locate me for years, but the address they had was the old house, and Sarah was intercepting mail," Patricia finished grimly. "How much?" $800,000, plus interest." Tommy whistled. Grandpa always said he had a few surprises tucked away. I stared at the check, thinking of Frank. Even from beyond, he was still taking care of me. But more than the money, it was the validation that touched me. He'd made sure I'd be okay no matter what. "What will you do with it?" Patricia asked. I looked at Tommy, thought of the 17 families Frank's fund had helped, considered the speaking requests that came weekly now. "I think it's time to think bigger," I said slowly. "What if we created a proper organization, not just emergency funds, but prevention programs, legal advocacy, safe housing? We could call it the Frank Patterson Center for Elder Dignity." Tommy interrupted, grinning. "Grandpa would love that." He was right. Frank would love it. Not the money or the recognition, but the idea of protecting others from what I'd endured. My phone buzzed. Another text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then saw the preview. Mrs. Patterson, this is Warden Johnson from the correctional facility. I opened it fully. Sarah had been placed on suicide watch after her latest appeal was denied. Despite everything, my heart clenched. I need to make a call, I said quietly. Patricia and Tommy exchanged glances but said nothing as I stepped inside. Warden Johnson was professional but compassionate. She's asking for you, Mrs. Patterson. I understand the situation, but sometimes these conversations can help with rehabilitation. Can I think about it? Of course. There's no pressure. I just wanted you to know. I stood in Richard's living room surrounded by new memories untainted by betrayal. On the mantel sat photos of Frank of Tommy at graduation, of Mrs. Chen's birthday party, of Patricia and me at the foundation launch. A life rebuilt from ashes. Maybe that's what forgiveness looked like. Not forgetting, not excusing, but acknowledging the human broken by their own choices. Sarah was my daughter. That biology didn't change just because trust died. I'll come next week, I heard myself say. One visit, we'll see. When I returned to the deck, Tommy and Patricia were debating college majors. I settled back into my chair, letting their normalcy wash over me. This was my family now. Chosen, tested, true. You okay, Grandma? Tommy asked, ever perceptive. I'm good, sweetheart. Just thinking about second chances. Everyone deserves those, he said simply, but not everyone earns them. Wisdom from the mouths of babes, or in this case from a young man who'd chosen integrity over easy compliance. As the evening wound down and Patricia left with promises to review the foundation paperwork, Tommy and I cleaned up together. He'd head to his girlfriend's family cabin for the weekend, leaving me with solitude I now cherished rather than endured. Grandma, he said as he gathered his keys, I know you're thinking about visiting Mom. Whatever you decide, I support you. But remember, you saving yourself gave me permission to save myself too. That's the greatest gift you could have given me. After he left, I walked through the house Richard had left me. Every room held possibility now instead of memory. I'd painted the walls in colors Frank loved, hung curtains that actually matched bought furniture that didn't come from garage sales. In my bedroom, I opened the jewelry box where I kept my wedding rings. Beside them lay the brooch with the hidden camera that had captured evidence of my abuse. 2 objects, 2 chapters of my life. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart but hadn't used in months. Hello. The voice was cautious, institutionalized. Sarah, it's Mom. I hear you want to talk. Silence. Then a broken whisper. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm so sorry. I know, I said, and found that I meant it. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust or erase consequences, but it's a start. I don't deserve... No, I cut her off. You don't get to decide what you deserve. That's my choice now. You took enough of those away. You're right. You're always right. No, Sarah. I wasn't always right. I was so wrong for so long, enabling instead of empowering, sacrificing instead of modeling self-respect. We both have lessons to learn from this. We talked for an hour, not about forgiveness or futures, but about accountability and growth. She told me about her therapy, about facing the woman she'd become. I told her about the foundation, about choosing to transform pain into purpose. When we hung up, I felt neither joy nor sorrow, just completion. A circle closed, even if it would never again be whole. I made myself tea, Earl Grey, no additives, and settled onto the deck to watch stars appear over the sound. Frank's voice seemed to whisper in the wind chimes, I'm proud of you, Eleanor. Tomorrow I'd meet with lawyers about the foundation expansion. Next week, I'd visit my daughter in prison. In the fall, I'd wave goodbye as Tommy started college. life would continue its complex dance of loss and renewal. But tonight, I was simply Eleanor Patterson, not anyone's victim or anyone's savior. Just a woman who'd learned that the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to say enough and the wisdom to know you're worth saving. The stars winked into existence one by one, each a small light against vast darkness, like the 17 families we'd helped, like Tommy choosing truth, like Patricia rebuilding her sister's ruins, like me finally choosing myself. All right, I said to the night sky, the word that had started my journey to freedom. But now it meant something different. Not resignation, but acceptance. Not defeat, but victory. I was all right, more than all right. I was free. And that I knew as I headed inside to my warm, safe, chosen home was how Frank would have wanted my story to end. Not with bitterness or regret, but with grace and growth, and the fundamental understanding that had taken me 65 years to learn. You can't pour from an empty cup, but when you fill it yourself, you'll never run dry again. I learned that boundaries aren't walls meant to keep love out. They're foundations that keep respect in. Every mother reading this, every grandmother who's given until there's nothing left, remember, loving your children doesn't mean losing yourself. The greatest gift you can give them isn't endless sacrifice, but the example of a woman who knows her worth. As I close this chapter of my life and open another, I want to ask you, have you been pouring from an empty cup? Have you been so busy being needed that you've forgotten to be valued? It's never too late to reclaim your worth. Trust me, I'm living proof. If my story resonated with you, if it made you think about relationships in your own life that might need boundaries, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Consider sharing this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't measured in what they sacrifice, but in who they are. Please subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about families' redemption and the courage to start over. And hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, especially by those who claim to love them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, you are worth fighting for, especially when the person you need to fight is looking back at you in the mirror. Stay strong, value yourself, and never forget saying no to disrespect is saying yes to your own worth. Until next time, this is Eleanor reminding you that it's never too late to choose yourself. With love and hope for your own journey, Eleanor Patterson.